What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another 5 minutes with Sean, maybe 10. I know we've been on quite the guest run lately, and this was not supposed to happen today. Your regularly scheduled programming was supposed to be me sitting here by myself talking to you about some fun topic. Well, that shit's going to have to wait till next week because we had a hot item come up this week on LinkedIn, my social media of preference, obviously. And so I am joined by Brian and Sandy. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Fantastic.
How you doing, BK?
You guys are doing wonderful, and you're going to be doing wonderful after you listen to what we're talking about. So for those of you who don't know, Brian recently listed an article about a struggle consumer had buying a vehicle online from Carvana. And while it may be Carvana, it's really not the point of our story here today. Point of the story is that these pitfalls can happen to anyone adopting a digital retail lifestyle. And it's not just technology. As Brian talked about a little bit in our pre-show, technology is literally the tip of the digital iceberg as it relates to that. So I'm going to let Brian sort of open it up with his article. Brian, talk to me a little bit about how you stumbled on the article and why you felt it necessary to bring it forward. And by the way, I think that was one of the longest write-ups I've ever seen from you on an article. I really dug that, man. So keep it up. And tell us about how we got there.
So I can't take the credit for it. Jared Kilway, our chief digital guy, actually forwarded it to me and said, this is why every piece of the puzzle is so important. And he and I always go round and round, and he challenges me and I challenge him, and he's a great partner, in that, along with Wendell Hardy. And actually the whole management team, but he's the one who brought it to my attention. And I'm looking at it, and he was talking about the breakdowns in the process, because your initial reaction to that is, here's Carvana. Look, first they had the situation in South Carolina with the tag and title. Now they've got this situation. It's just a flash in the pan. It's just a matter before they implode, and here they go. But when you really sit there and unpack what is going on with that deal, and you start looking at the blockchain aspect of their process workflow, it's very clear to me, because I've experienced similar things with odometer discrepancies and people seeing a car online and then showing up here and it's not, and no different than Walmart says with their fulfillment rate online. That's going to be the biggest struggle over the next 10 years. Once everybody goes through digital transformation, then it's about stocking. Does your online shelf reflect what your in-store shelf looks like? And with Instacart and all these other grocery stores, they said it's getting harder and harder with produce and dairy and all these other things. Cars are just the next thing. They don't have HomeNet. They don't have the vendors we have, right? So they're building everything from the inside out, Carvana. So for them to be able to show what's online and whatever their DMS is, whatever their HomeNet type thing is, does it upgrade every 24 hours, every 15 minutes, every hour? Like in our case, we learned the hard way that, our website provider would update based on our vAuto feed. So vAuto, because we don't use HomeNet, we just go straight to vAuto.
Right.
But that was only open up, at 2:00 in the morning. So if we sold a car at 2:00 in the afternoon, customer in Orlando sees it, they drive down that night to buy the car, it was sold that morning, they get pretty upset when you can't do what you said you're going to do. And that, I think, is going to be in the next 5 years, the new bait and switch. Does your online inventory reflect that? Does your online process reflect, like you always say, if the process is the same. If you have an online process, a remote process, a virtual process, if somebody wants a value for their trade, it's the same process. It's like in Zoolander, right? It's like the same look. So there is no difference. But however you handle all of those things, regardless of the channel, an omni-channel, it's about how you execute it. And clearly what happened in that article is that young lady requested something. She was under an impression of how they're going to handle it. It looks like they didn't respond to her quickly enough because they have so much AI and they've overcorrected to the other side that they forgot the human element. And I think that's the most important takeaway from this, is that there's two issues with the human interaction in digital. It's the highest in our store, probably every organization. It's the most likelihood of errors and and frequency of things that can go wrong, right? That was obviously a human error. Somebody bypassed something, overrode something, because I promise you, they got a workflow that prevents that from happening. And somebody, for somebody else tried to take care of them and go outside of the process and bypass it or find a workaround, which is what happens here. And they think they're helping somebody, but they end up hurting somebody else. And that was that young lady. And that's the first thing. The second thing is that you can't forget about the human interaction and the emotional connection of just calling somebody back and responding to them. Even if you don't have good news or you don't have something to tell them, you just have to own it. And I got to tell you that, with all this stuff, and it's only going to get, like you're saying, the technology, this is just the tip of the spear. When people, get a vendor, they get a bolt on, or they get some widget or some DR tool, that is not at all just, okay, that's problem solved. Now we're doing digital retailing. That's it's not like you planted it on the summit. That's just the beginning. You're at base camp, and there's so much more to go. And then to come back down, it's a huge undertaking, and it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, and so Brian, there's two things really fast there. Two things. One, you gave me an A and a B, right? An example of what's going wrong. Both of them had the word human in it. Whether it was human error or human interaction, the point remains humans are still a large part of a process, okay? And whether someone did overstep or someone didn't pay attention, the overcorrection, obviously on AI, I think these are the things that can happen with a lot of that stuff because maybe humans aren't paying as much attention because why do it if someone else is going to do it for you type attitude, which I really like. And secondly, I'll say this, and then we're going to get into Sandy's version of kind of what he knows and has seen of it, is that when we talk about digital retail and putting the widget on the site, Brian, as the first thing, dude, I got to tell you, more and more, I think it should be like one of the last things you do. Right? Like culturally speaking, your store you should have managers doing appraisals by phone, giving numbers by phone, because if you can't get yourself past the phone, you have zero chance of letting someone pencil a deal start to finish.
I completely agree.
I think that's the next sort of evolution is this, like, don't get a tool. Get a culture of DR, get a culture of remote retail, which is, again, as I've always said, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about digital retail because ultimately this woman didn't just go through and buy a car online. She had to deal with humans along the way that made things worse in some cases because it's a call center. It's not a dealership. Brian, if I had a problem with the purchase of your car, I wouldn't end up at a call center, dude. I wouldn't. I'd end up on your desk more than likely. And if that's the case, you're the human who's going to make it right. They don't have those humans. Those are just vending machines, folks, just so we're clear. They're not manned by people penciling car deals who have a clue as to how to make things right for you. So I'm a big part of that. So Sandy jumps on, right? Sandy's like, Brian, let's, next time I'm in Florida, let's talk about this. I didn't want to wait for Florida because I don't know when I'm going to be there. So I want to hear it now. I want everyone else to hear it. So Sandy, talk to us about I think it's like a real life Carvana experience that Sandy himself has gone through. Sandy, tell us about it, buddy.
Well, yeah, before we get to that, Sean, I just want to, I want to dovetail what Brian was talking about. I think, to properly put the article in context, the way that I read it, and I think the way Brian interpreted it and perfectly articulated it, was that we had a typical or a not too crazy automobile dealer problem that can occur regardless of whether it's an AI or it's an online retailing issue that was not going to be solved by AI. It needed to be solved by human intervention, and that is where Carvana does have an Achilles heel. And I have to say this to you: I did have a personal experience, and I think I shared with you, backstage, if you will, that the reason that I ended up doing a deal from stem to stern with Carvana was manifold. First of all, I had a client that asked me to do that, and that they would work with me on it so they can gather the intel. And I quite honestly, once that was suggested to me, said, "Wow, that is a great idea. Let's do that." And so I went literally from the shopping experience all the way through to delivery. And I'll give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between. And BK, please chime in at any time, because the one thing I want to give Brian Kramer the nod on is that he thinks about the CX piece of digital retailing like nobody else out there. I was blown away when I went down to visit with Brian a couple of months ago down in Naples, and saw the way that they had process mapped the I would say the interweaving of the customer experience between offline, online, and how he's able to actually seamlessly go back and forth between online and offline. And I think that he deserves a ton of credit along with his team down there. So that said, I will tell you that the experience that I had with Carvana was really interesting. Was shopping for a vehicle and had something very specific in mind. And so as I shopped, I found a vehicle that fit virtually perfectly what we were looking for. And so made the commitment, did the entire, spin the vehicle around inside, outside. Their virtual tools are outstanding. The AI is outstanding from that perspective. I can look at multiple different photos. I can look at it from any different angle that I want to. And I found the perfect vehicle.
Sandy, hold on. Sorry, but I'm going to stop you because I want to ask you something. So, with the idea of the virtual photos and that sort of interaction, is that something you see? Because I know you're all over. You have automotive clients. That's your life. That's all of our lives. Are you seeing anything similar out there in the dealership world, or is there something very specific about their photo setup that is not duplicatable, right? Which is not a word, but is it something that is impossible for others to do, or is it just the way that they set it up that makes it clean and looks easy, but anyone can do it?
Great question. The answer is yes and no. There are some tools in the marketplace right now that are akin to what they offer. The thing that I think is probably most appreciated is they're pointing out blemishes, imperfections, etc., on the vehicle, and give you a very simple way to have an interactive experience to see exactly what those are. So there's really no mystery in terms of what the condition of the vehicle is by the time it arrives at your front door. Now that said, the one piece to that experience that I did not anticipate and wasn't really thinking about was I saw that this was a coming soon vehicle. Now, Brian, you've studied Carvana and you know that the coming soon piece, well, only 50% of the coming soon was true in this instance. It was coming, it just didn't come soon. We waited almost 50 days for that vehicle. I'm sorry, to actually make a decision to switch to another vehicle, because I will tell you, we had countless phone calls, myself and my wife, back and forth with Carvana. And I actually had a screenshot that I saved. I'm not going to show it to you, but I will tell you that the one screenshot that I saved was an hour and 15 minutes. And that was about the norm when I wanted to actually speak to somebody. There were multiple times that I had to actually hang up because I had to get on with life, throughout the course of that day.
Which you'll see on all their consumer reviews deal. And I'm going to tag on to this at the end because please I'm very passionate about exactly where you're going. Yep. Because in order to live up on all those brand promises, it's a ripple effect throughout what you're probably about to go into.
Oh, yeah, but absolutely right.
But we also kind of led this thing off with this before we talk about the idea of the new bait and switch, right? Because ultimately that's where I'm feeling right now. As Sandy tells his story, I'm thinking to myself, this is not going to go the way he envisioned it to go. It's coming soon. It's this, it's that. It just seems like a very, I don't know. It seems like a little bit of a shady way to go about it. All right, Sandy, continue forward.
I'll tell you, I don't know that I'll go shady, but here's what I'll say. It was wildly disappointing. But here, I had time on my side. I did not need the vehicle right that second. You follow me? So I was willing to play the game. I really wanted to play it out and see how it was actually resolved. The truth of the matter is that coming soon vehicle never showed up, not at my front door, and that issue was never resolved. And it took multiple different phone calls, hours on the telephone. The times that I did speak with people, I was given hollow promises that somebody would follow up and give me a call the following day. That times like this, things like this happen from time to time because of the reconditioning and where vehicles were being shipped in from to the central reconditioning centers, et cetera. I heard every story under the sun. And the most disappointing piece was I never, ever got the follow-up phone calls that were promised. So to Brian's point, that human interaction, the human element of what we're talking about with the customer experience is critical. And that's one thing that AI will never, ever, ever be able to deliver. AI can solve problems only to a certain point to human satisfaction. Does that make sense?
Agreed. And I think, and so go ahead, Brian, because I want to hear to your point with the idea that, hey, the human is the part of it, and this, Sandy, I dealt with something similar with my cell phone provider where you call in and it's, I don't have 2 hours. So if we're in a 40-minute wait time, that's one thing. I got the same thing, hollow promises, no one's going to call you back. No, and you're left with nothing. You're left with no other way to go because there's no showroom to show up to and start yelling at people or having a conversation with it. Right. Brian, what you were going to say something when Sandy started about his direction here with the flow and the sort of interweaving. How do you view that on your end, man?
Before I ask him that question, did it halt or stall your transaction on the cell phone?
What?
The reason I asked this is because of this. I went through the same thing on a refrigerator and a range,
Yeah.
right? And there was a certain brand that I wanted to get, and I'm going back and forth, and I tried submitting a lead to the local appliance store. That's it's a local brand right down the street. Great customer service when I went in there in person. They have no online presence. It just has autoresponders. Somebody will be in touch with you shortly. And I'm like, look, I just want to transact, but I was able to get something out of AJ Madison, New Jersey, easier than I could a block down the road. So I just decided I'm not going to transact. And it wasn't that I was going to go buy from a competitor. I'm just like, you know what, this is just brain damage. It's not worth it. Same thing I just went through with the generator. I go, it's taking me 3 days going back and forth. These guys not giving me a price. And I just want, I'm not even trying to, I'm just want to give up at this point. So they called me up from Generac and they said, hey, did how was your experience with the thing? I said, I'm just out of the market. Oh, what did you end up buying? I'm not buying anything. I've already wasted 3 days. That's the worst. I'm going to be out of power. The worst case scenario with a hurricane. And that's what I wanted it for. You've already sucked 3 days out of my life of all this BS going back and forth.
Yeah.
So I don't need the generator because it's more, friction dealing with you to buy one than what I would deal with the friction of a portable generator in the event of a hurricane. So I'm good. I'll just get a hotel somewhere and get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with you guys anymore. So now I'm just not in the market. And I see that a lot of people that are looking at cars, when they start this digital journey, when they realize that it's not what they thought it was, I don't see them on my lost sale report. They just go ice and they're like, hey, it's just too much. And they just disengage and they don't buy anything. That's why the average car on the road is 12 years old. They're saying that it would be 6 years old on Carvana's shareholders report, or less than that if it was easier. But they ask you the question, Sandy, why do you think that, because I've got a pretty good guesstimate as to why that vehicle never became available.
Why do I think so?
Yeah.
I think that they bought a vehicle that probably had an issue with it that they could not resolve on the reconditioning side. And so that vehicle just never made it to the point where it was available for me to purchase. It's that simple. I mean, I had asked multiple times. I had 2 or 3 phone calls where I actually did speak to somebody. I will say they're very polite, very apologetic, and they were empathetic. And that's the piece that AI can't deliver. And this point I wanted to make is most humans have an innate ability to empathize with somebody that's in a particular situation. AI can never do that, right? And so if I had to deal with AI throughout that entire experience and never be able to get somebody on the phone, to Brian's point, I would have abandoned the purchase or the process at that point in time and said, listen, nobody gives 2 shakes of a tail about whether or not I'm having a good experience or not. I'm out. And I just would have taken myself out of the market.
I mean, and that seems fair for what you were going to spend on a car. And it seems fair for what Brian would spend on a generator. And for, you know what I mean? Like that seems fair to remove yourself from the market because it's not there. Sandy, was there any point where you were going to do that?
No. And Sean, I'm glad you asked my question because I was, chapter 9 of the book, Think and Grow Rich, is called persistence. And I was going to persist my way through to the end because I wanted to have that 360-degree perspective of what the experience was like with Carvana. So I will tell you what I did do. In the last phone call that I had a human being on the other end of the phone, I said, let me ask you guys a question. You've wasted now almost 50 days of my time, hours upon hours on the phone. I'm just curious, what are you willing to do for me goodwill wise to make this a better experience? What do you think the answer I got was?
I'm gonna go with less than $1,000 of whatever. Well, I don't know if it's credits. I don't know what it would be, but I'm gonna go with less than $1,000.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with 0, and they're gonna say that our goal is to make it a frictionless experience, and that's our end goal, and we try to do that every day.
There you go,
some textbook, word track.
That's it. That's all you got. 50 days, and Sandy, you probably don't work for $12 an hour. So if we're gonna make hourly and we're going to multiply that by the time spent, it looks like someone probably owes you a check for a couple $1,000s of time spent and wasted that again Brian could not do. He could not answer a customer in that way at his dealership in Naples, Florida today at all. His business would be shot. The reviews would be everywhere. And for some reason, their negative reviews don't matter as much as Brian's do. And I just don't get that. I don't get why the humans take a bigger hit than the computer does when it comes to shitty service.
Well, they have plenty of them, but they push them down and they're very good at it.
Bingo. Yeah, well, they're very good at it, but because here's the deal. I don't want to say that my experience was necessarily the norm, right? Because I will say I've heard people that have had good experience on Carvana. The fact of the matter is, though, you just hit a key point. You said that Brian couldn't do that and get away with it. And my answer is Brian wouldn't do that, nor would his team.
Uh,
And there's a big difference between couldn't and wouldn't in this circumstance. And that is, I think, the thing that we can hang our hats on as retail automobile dealers, where we've got that human capacity on the CX piece to deliver the kind of experience that a digital retailer that's purely online and relying or over relying on AI can never deliver. Fair point, Brian?
Absolutely, Sandy. And you and I, spitball back and forth on this, but we're both under the impression the customer should never have to pay for our inefficiencies,
Bingo.
regardless of what's happening, which it happens as you're going through this transformational journey. None of us are perfect, and we're far from it. And Carvana does a lot of things really well, but if it's an error on our side, I'll give you an example. Here recently, we had a sight unseen appraisal where it went into the system. The market changed, within the time frame that we said, and the market on that particular vehicle dropped $2,000. Well, we're not going to give that to them, but it says it's good for 7 days, right?
Right.
And that's part of the reason why Carvana doesn't. The other reason why they don't get these trades processed, or it says sale pending, because they don't have the other deal approved yet, or they don't have the stips, and it's still hanging. It hangs out there forever, and then they end up not getting it hung, and that's how that car disappears from the market. But
Well, that's a great
they
point. It was one of the other things I thought about, BK, was did they have a title issue with it? And so, at
that's
the end
their
of the
number
day,
one point of friction.
yeah, right now it is. And by
well,
the way, they're not
clearly,
alone.
yeah, clearly North Carolina, it's a problem for them too. But Brian, when you look at that, when you talk about the finance deal getting hung in that article, that woman basically says she was given the bank was, I think, given the wrong information or the wrong car, and it happened to
Wrong
be
VIN.
their bank, if you will, their partner bank. Which again, it doesn't lend its hand to clarity, right? When all of a sudden these sort of things happen. And I mean, to unwind a car deal that's already been to the bank and VIN'd up, oh boy. I mean, that in the article made it sound like her first phone call, someone was like, no problem, we'll just send you a different car and everything will be fine. It was like, no way, that's so much work to go through and headache of people. Brian, in your journey, as we call it here, into the remote retail world of selling a car anywhere at any time for any reason, these issues of title or these issues of bank financing, are they greater of an issue than vehicle availability, or how would you sort of weigh those situations?
That's a really good question. I would say that they're both, and it depends on the state. And every single time, we've got like an internal knowledge drive that we're tracking all this stuff on as everything changes. But I'll give you a couple examples. In Florida, it's very easy to do everything electronically. In Massachusetts, it's not. And I didn't understand until I called a friend of mine that's up there, and I said, hey, state of Massachusetts is saying they got to wait 3 to 7 days to take delivery because they have insurance bound on it. Oh yeah, that's just standard practice. I'd never heard. I mean, that sounds absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah.
That then
I'll
New
refrain
Hampshire,
from comment, Brian. You know where I'm going with that, Brian.
yeah, New York, Cook County, in Chicago. There's all this craziness, and then if Arkansas, Mississippi, and West Virginia, you got to pay double sales tax. If you live there and you buy a car out of state, you got to pay that tax and this tax. And I guess coming up with like a big Rosetta Stone or some kind of T-square that you can sit there and say, does this align with this? I mean, it is a brutally painful deal. And I know Bernie Marino's working on his champ title, blockchain car titles, but I mean, he's running for Senate, to help, detangle all of this mess, because Automotive News called me recently and they said, what do you think the number one issue is with digital retail? It's inhibiting dealers from moving forward. And they didn't seem too excited about it. But I said, I think the number one obstacle, period, by a long shot, is the tag and title complexity from state to state. You don't have that kind of stuff in Europe. And that alone would decentralize this entire situation. I mean, I can tell you, I've had not like that Carvana story, but I've had all kinds of horror stories of 2-3 temp tags and COVID shut down in this county. But this county's open, and Colorado has this rule, and every single different municipality has all these different rules, and they change, and depending on which DMV you call, and I mean, it's a business opportunity, I guess, but it's also it can make your stomach turn with the amount of cost. And I've paid tens of thousands of dollars in errors by trying this different things and touching this electric fence. And I'm okay with that. And it's the cost of innovation. And I wouldn't have it any other way. But now we at least know a process. Okay, that didn't work. Let's do this and rewrite this. With Carvana, what the trick, the challenge that they're running into, which we're all going to run into at some point, is they have a 7-day return policy. So they can't begin their process until the 8th day. Because if it's within that 7 days, they can't already have the car titled, then it causes a whole other wormhole of mess. And if it's e-contracted, e-funded, now you got to do a flat cancel, and it's just crazy.
Right. So you got cars driving around that aren't titled for at least right, like you're saying, for like 6 days. You're driving around with a car that isn't actually technically yours by all purposes that you have. Obviously, that can be a little bit weird and concerning. The biggest problem, I think, with digital retail, the reason dealers aren't behind it, is because it still isn't a big enough driver from the consumer side. I know a lot, Brian. I know you do a lot of it. A lot of people are there, but digital retail is still something that consumers on new cars and still want to be in showrooms. They still want a part of that. You've talked about it before. So I'm glad.
How many people knew they wanted an iPhone when they had a BlackBerry before they knew what it was? And what we're seeing is an upward trend, right? So we're seeing it was 6% 2 years ago. Now it's 11% of credit applications completed online. And then now it's 26%. And we see that with everything, depending on if somebody's buying another car and they've already gone through that experience, the comfort of all of this and familiarity is increasing slowly but surely.
And I think that's another
tracking
reason.
It all.
Well, that's another reason we've got to be better with the process, because at the end of the day, it's going to be about expectation, right? Is if you don't have expectation, it doesn't matter the cost of anything to me. It's how I feel. Is if someone sets proper expectation for me that I agree to the price, as long as the follow through happens, then the price is validated. But the absolute second that I no longer feel value, you might as well cancel the deal, because I'm not going to be able to get past that. Very few people can overcome when I feel like I've lost value in a deal. And to your point, I probably
trust.
just back out. Yeah, trust,
right?
value.
Hit the nail on the head, Sean. Yeah. It's trust. Period. End of story. And it's no different in the traditional retail model than it is digitally online. It's
just digital trust.
It's the number one ingredient for a great relationship long term. And I have to say this, I just want a quick aside, is that, outside of that portion of the CX with Carvana, when things did get right and we selected another vehicle, now I'll tell you there was disappointment there as well, because I had to take a vehicle that was a year older with a little bit more mileage on it, a little bit of a discount, but not a discount that I felt was commensurate with what we were getting. But from that point forward, the experience was absolutely seamless, and all the way up until delivery. So I want to go through that real quickly, Sean, if I could.
Yes,
please. I financed a small portion online because I wanted to see what that experience was like as well. Seamless, painless, quick and easy, and answer immediately. All the documentation completed online at that moment in time. I didn't have to wait an additional day or two for that to be loaded up and sent to me. Once that was done, we scheduled delivery. They brought the vehicle to us. When the vehicle was delivered, I had the opportunity to inspect the vehicle. They did a quasi touchless. I mean, BK knows I don't worry about the touchless piece of it too much, but they did deliver a virtual touchless delivery. And here's the cool thing, right? This is one thing I want to give them props for, and especially the young lady that delivered the vehicle by flatbed. It showed up and only one of the two keys was operational. She immediately on a tablet put in a work order for a replacement key. They partnered with Car Keys Express, and she said you'll have a key within the first week to 10 days of actually the 7-day guarantee period, which all came to fruition. Car Keys Express showed up at the house to code the keys. We ended up with actually 3 sets of keys because they brought an additional key blank, and it was handled as promised at that point in time. So to be fully transparent and fair to Carvana, once we got through the crappy portion of the experience, which by the way they probably lost the number of people there. Once I got past that, the experience was fairly seamless and something that I could certainly tolerate.
Yeah, but to this point, this was an act of research and for the purpose of science.
Correct.
It was not right, but if it was not,
Absolutely.
you're out, dude.
I
You
would have
are
been gone.
so and you ain't out 50 days. Fuck that. You're out in 15 days.
Tony, you're
at best.
absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely right. To be honest with you, about 7 days into the coming soon experience, I'd have raised holy hell with a dealer if I didn't get some type of a responsive action on their part, and I would have walked. I would have walked.
I love that in the name of science.
Yeah, well, that's what we're out here doing, right? That's we're trying to help ourselves get better as people, right? And as an industry.
I know Sandy loves to trust the science.
Well,
that's a fact, bro.
Yeah. I didn't know if that was going back to the whole contactless thing or not. You guys clearly got something going on there. I'm not gonna step in the science shit for that matter. I'm good on that one. But when we talk about DR, Brian, from where you sit, you talk about how it continues to grow and evolve and how people are going about it. And you're talking about that second experience. Are you already interacting with clients, Brian, who have done this sort of thing online before and have something to say to you about your experience versus their other experience?
That's another good question. So there's two-pronged answer to that. So the first one is when somebody comes in for their 5K, because we're just entering in our digital transformation in the service department. And, we just got through it in the our rental car business, because I rented a car myself for a while because I keep on abusing my FJ Cruiser and it keeps on becoming non-operational. So it's back in the shop for extended periods of time. Like it just had to have the radiator and the starter replaced because I landed on top of a rock and cracked it. But so as I keep renting cars, I had 16 pieces of paper the first time that I was doing it. I'm like, what is all this? And it's just standards the way. I'm like, why do you need it? Where what do you do with this? And they're trying to get defensive about, oh no, it's fine, it's not a big deal. We've got all these file folders and all. And I'm like, whoa, then I'm sitting there picturing, because I know my paper bill every month is $6,000, paper and ink. My shredding bill is $2,500. My storage to store all this paper is a couple $3,000. So when you sit there and you think about the cost of all of this times 12, let's say it's 120 grand a year.
Yeah, we got 100 grand for paper, and we're losing trees day after day because you people cannot get online.
More
so I
importantly,
tell
though,
my rental car team, I'm gonna. Oh yeah, Cindy, you rented a car there.
Yeah, I did. I was just gonna say you're losing customers' trust and confidence at that point as well. I did go through the process at Brian's store when we went down to visit. He was kind enough to rent a vehicle to me, and it was seamless. I got to be honest with you. It was, as a matter of fact, Brian, I probably should have wrote you a handwritten note to say thank you. I might have, I don't know, but I will tell you that it was the best rental experience that I have ever had, hands down.
And it used to suck. Let's just call it what it was.
I was going to say, Sandy, how much paper was in your experience?
I think I signed 2 documents on the pickup and 2 on the drop off.
All right, Brian, you got it from 15 to 4. Good job.
And it'll be 0 by January.
Right.
Working on that behind the scenes, mostly because I was waiting on Chase to do the digital integration. But here's the frequency of errors and all of those things. It's one of those things where it's just like, no pun intended, paper cutting you to death. I'm like, why did we do? Well, I don't know. And nobody really ever thinks, why do we have all these pieces of paper? And then what do we do with this paper? Where does it go? And where do we store it? And is it someplace where we can access it? And are they scanning it, or what are we doing here? And nobody ever asks those questions. They just do it. Yep. And I told them, I'm like the Lorax, I'm speaking for the trees and liberating
the truthful trees.
Yes. of all the paper in this whole place, it's a blue zone. So when the customers come in for service, they say, what is all this, right? There's a stack of this and the MPI and, yellow, green, red. Can't you just text this to me? Well, we do, but, so they're always just assuming that the customer wants it printed, and the customers, after going through, and they didn't know what they wanted until it was there. After they buy a car paperless, they're like, why am I filling out all this paperwork in the service department? Mm-hmm. And to answer your question, some of the repeats and referrals, I just had a friend of mine who had been here before, and he lives in South Carolina. He was trying to buy a car at his local South Carolina dealer, and he called me afterward. He goes, I filled out everything online. I completed everything. I went into the dealership and they said, okay, yeah, now who are you? Okay, let's do this. We're going to start the process all over again. Let's appraise your car. He goes, I already submitted this stuff. Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to need he goes, I got to pick my wife up in an hour at the airport. I just want to buy it. I goes, I already agreed to the price. I filled out my credit app. Well, here, let's print it. Let me see if I can pull it up. And 30 minutes into that, he goes, I got to go. So then he called me on the way back from the airport and he goes, hey, do you have something similar? I go, yeah, bro, why wouldn't you call me? He goes, I just thought it would be easier to buy from my local dealer. This was Saturday. I said, absolutely not. It's easier to buy here and I'll ship it to you. And that deal's going down. We're sending it, the paperwork's already done digitally. Cars on it, you're going to be on its way today. And it was easier for him to buy from us. And that's our goal at this Toyota store, is to be able to transact with my friend in South Carolina easier than the local dealer can, and make it less friction than that to where he doesn't think about going anywhere else, regardless of where we are geographically.
Two things on that. One, dude, I even tell the grocery store to save their receipt. Okay, that's how far I don't want people printing paper on you, uselessly. I don't need your grocery receipt. I can't write it off. Just keep your receipt. I'm fine. All right, let's move on from that. So I love your paper saving. Thank you. The hippie in me thanks you every day for that, Brian. But the ease of access. You see, this is why I call it remote retail, right? Because in 2005, when I was running a Subaru store in Colorado, it's how we put ourselves on the map. The owner said, how are we going to compete with guys on price? I don't want to compete with guys on price. I said, let's just take it to their house. And the guy I worked for was new to the car business. He was already wealthy doing other things. So he didn't have any preconceived notions. He didn't say to me, no, that's not how we do things. He was like, well, hell yeah, Sean, can you grow the market share? Let's grow the market share. And it was instantaneously. People were like, wait, what? Like in the mountains of Colorado, dude, it might be a 40-minute drive. To them, it's 2 days by horse and buggy. They ain't coming down. So if you want to roll up, though, they'll welcome you into their beautiful homes with views of the Continental Divide. You can do paperwork in the most gorgeous place on earth, and that's what we started doing. And we never had to talk about price. Well, price. How about we do it in your living room? Well, then yeah, whatever. I don't care about the price. And that's sort of the point, Brian. Is that I do it now. I still send friends and do my own business with that same Subaru store because it's easy. I'll have the paperwork FedExed, right? So I live in a state where you got to have wet paper in Wisconsin. You have to have ink on paper.
And there's still 32 states like that.
That's
right.
correct.
But that's okay. That's okay because FedEx has been around for 50 fucking years. So don't worry about it. It's not a big issue. And now, more so, when I did my mortgage online recently, a little refi action, right? All done just like this. It was me. Instead of Sandy, it was my mortgage gal. And instead of Brian, it was a notary. It was all done by a notary. And she's like, here you go. Please hit here. Please hit here. And I'm like, hey, can I sell a car this way? And of course, the girl's just a rep. She's like, what? We're doing a mortgage. I'm like, yeah, never mind. Give me your boss's name. I want to go ask all these questions. I want to understand because here it is. This cures all of it. If I can do a mortgage in Wisconsin that way, damn it, I got to be close to doing a car deal that way. If all it takes is a notary, come on.
That's what initially, and we have 2 notary services that are good anywhere coast to coast that we use for wedding states. That way you don't get fraud. It doesn't, it meets the manufacturer's complaint because everybody goes, oh, the manufacturer, you have to be on site. You got to get physical delivery. Yep. The notary is your physical agent. But to your point, I also just did a refi, and I did a refi with the same, my mortgage company is Toyota. So they did my mortgage maybe 5 years ago, and they did it completely digitally, touchless, nothing, right? So then fast forward to a few months ago, and they called me up and they said, hey, we want to lower your interest rate 75 basis points. Okay, what's the catch? Well, we don't want to lose you to another competitor, and we don't want somebody else calling you. So we'd rather, you just calling to save me money. Okay, so let's do this. So they ended up getting a notary. He comes in with a stack of paperwork like this, and he comes in, and I go, what is all this? I said, I've already done it. He goes, that's not the way it works in Florida. I go, well, how did I do my last mortgage like that? So they used a different notary service, and he keeps on going. He goes, this is just required. This is very, but it's not required. I can show you my other stuff. It was done. I go, anyway, I'll go through your little exercise here. And he kept asking questions, and I'm, ADD's catching on, and I'm wandering around my house. He goes, where are you going? You got to stay focused. I go, just give it to my son, all blank. My wife's going to read it because I have no clue on any of that stuff anyway.
Right.
But he kept on. But when they sent me the survey, I gave him, obviously all 10s, except for that experience. And it wasn't the gentleman, God bless him. It was the fact of what he was telling me the law was, and it was federal regulations, and it's this, and it has to be done this way, when I know it doesn't. And I'm like, hey, man, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just don't tell me that because it's not true. So you're losing my trust when you start talking like that.
Right. And that's there it is, right? Here's the trust. Back to what Sandy talks about, trust in the process, trust in the people. I don't trust you when you tell me something is not factual or not. And I think, Brian, dealers are doing the same thing. Sandy just said it, right? They're doing the same thing with the paperwork. They're doing the same thing with the story. Oh, customer, yeah, in our state, we just can't do things digitally. It's like, well, nothing. You can't have a credit app. You can't do, I mean, like I said, this was 2004. I went to a company at the time, the website company called Dealer Skins. For those of you who've been doing this long enough, you'll know the name.
Sure.
And I went to them and I said, I need a secure place for a credit card. They're like, what do you need a credit card for? I said, because I got to take people's deposits, dude. The only way I get car deals done, remotely is to have, okay, we got a AAA secure. It's going to cost this. I'm like, fine, I don't care. And then that became a norm, right? Right out, everyone was doing that. Credit apps became secure. Guys, we've had the tools forever.
But credit cards are still like that today. I just got it handled last Thursday with Chase, and I've been working on it since January.
That was about 6 weeks for you, no?
Yes. Oh, longer, just to get it closed.
Yeah.
But they
Fellas,
didn't even know.
I don't want to bury something in this conversation because I think it's important to note, and Sean brought it up, and Brian, you and I have talked about this. Price becomes less of a consideration when convenience and trust are at the tippy top of the experience. Okay. And so to your point, nobody's negotiating with Carvana, right?
No. Because A, there's no one to negotiate with, and B, it's because it takes you through the process. It doesn't ask for you to do that. It assumes the sale from the moment you go looking at a picture all the way through to you don't get the car you bought. It doesn't really make a difference. It's just assume.
Correct.
And but Sandy, let me ask you something. Is there any point for you when you look at your Carvana deal now that you would say to yourself, all right, the next time I do this, have you changed your expectations of what you should expect online, or will you have just the same sort of expectation you did previous the next time you buy a car online? And will you buy a car online?
Oh, sure. I would buy a car online. I would prefer to buy from clients, right? Obviously. And that, as you know, there was a method behind the madness of the Carvana deal in the first place. But the answer is yes, I would, because what Brian was alluding to before, and Brian's in a really unique spot because they have process mapped this thing out to death. And they have wrung out a lot of the inefficiencies, and they understand. And this is, I think, what's lost in the marketplace right now amongst our dealer population is Brian understands the online, offline, and how it goes back and forth from time to time. The number that Brian shared with me in terms of the pure online end-to-end digital retail transactions that they executed between January and when I was in there, I think in April or May, Brian.
Yep.
It staggered me because
it's 5%.
Yeah, it was well below what I thought the answer was going to be, especially based on what I had seen in terms of the process maps that they had put together. So my answer is yes, I would do it online because I want to see this continually get better, but dealers need to close the gaps and pay attention to it the way that Brian and his team have. And really, I think Rob Ruth is a great example as well up in PA, somebody that's really looking at the opportunity to blur the line between traditional and digital retailing, if you will. I think it's the same damn thing. We just have to figure out the processes effectively.
I agree with that, and I think that it's interesting, Brian, because you're at 5%, right? That's the number you said. That's the big number. But to your point of evolution, right? A year ago, that number was 1 or 2.5, right? So in 12, 15, 18 months, it has doubled. I get it. It didn't go from 80 to 90. Okay, but 2 to 5 is still a doubling. I would take that of my portfolio if it did that tomorrow. I would take a doubling no matter what. And so it's doubling. I don't care if the number's not that big. It proves.
But here's the more powerful number. The more powerful number is 93%, because that's the percentage of the customers that interacted with one aspect of the online digital retail process. Correct. That Sandy saw when he was down here on the workflow. 93% interact with 1 or 2 of those elements: credit app, the friction points, right? Selection, credit app, trade appraisal, F&I interview, and then F&I presentation, and then actual paperwork products. It doesn't matter where they start, but as soon as I can provide something that the competitor can't provide, or the dealer in South Carolina can't provide, and when I can do something they can't, I have a competitive advantage. That's not about price.
Brian?
Correct. And you've always said that. You last time I had you on the show, which, by the way, Brian, I think you're like one of the first repeat guests we've ever had. And this is going to be show like 191, so 192. So thank you so much for that. But
there we go.
When we first talked, dude, you had talked about your sales, your marketing no longer had anything to do about payments, price, lease options. It was beaches, it was jet skis, boats, come by wherever, whenever. Has that changed, Brian, or is that still continuing the message? And will you continue with that if it is still that?
So it has continued, and the beaches and the jet. Why would you want to be at a Toyota dealership all day when you could be at the beach? It's a mile that way. And what we're in production on right now, which is going to be very cool, and I'm going to be releasing it next month, is we're going to pull the curtain back, and we're going to put our process, not just for our salespeople, but our process. We're going to walk everybody through it on TV, so that the customer can experience step by step exactly what it's going to be. And there's no internal process, external process. We're just putting it on Front Street, and this is what you can expect, and this is how it rolls.
Brian?
Well, you want to talk about the ultimate in transparency and then accountability on the team side. You marry those two pieces together, you're off to the races.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna come up with 30-second spots for the TV where you're gonna show people some sort of dynamic process of online, you know, we've been telling clients now for 2-3 years about digital retail or trading tools. If you're going to have an ad, you want to push somebody, show the CX of your tool in the ad. Don't bother showing them, a mindless mountain with nothing and say, come trade your car in. No, show them. Go to valleysubaru.com, click on the trade icon from Carfax, take yourself through. And again, these vendors, in some cases, they're going to give you their asset use. Carfax is like, you want to do what? Here you go. Have everything. And now Carfax is coming to us saying, well, what can you just produce videos for all of our clients this way? It's like, well, are you serious? You guys do this yourselves. It's your CX. But the point is they didn't realize people were utilizing parts that way. So, Sandy, I know you want to add on to Brian's point here. What else you got?
Two things, Shawnee. There's two things. First of all, I love the simplicity of what Brian's doing from a marketing perspective. Tell them what we're going to do it, and then remind them what you've done. I mean, that's it. And if you can execute across the board on all three of those steps, you're not only going to have repeat buyers and referral clients coming through the door, you're going to have a level of advocacy in the marketplace where people are going to laugh when you buy a vehicle other than at Germain in Naples. You follow me? Why would you go anyplace else? Because they deliver the kind of experience that nobody else is delivering. The second point I want to make is, and Brian and I have talked about this, the market share grab that Carvana is executing right now is going to be staggering. Right? Did you use the word staggering too, Brian?
I did, yeah.
Oh, I just said it. Like
frequency.
You two are staggering in stereo, so I just get it printed on the screen.
That is
awesome. Right, market share is staggering.
It's the truth, because what's happening right now in a market where profits are at record level, but the volume of transactions is actually on the decline because of availability issues, Carvana's market share is climbing. Brian talked about it from the acquisition side. That's a big key to their success right now. But just think about this for a second. If you look at 2020, statistically speaking, they had just shy of like 2%, just shy of 2% of the market on the used car side. Pardon me. Just shy of 0.2% on the used car market side. You're talking about 45 million cars on average annually that are sold pre-owned, right? And they're just getting 288,000 of the 45 million. So the point is, there is such huge upside opportunity, not just for franchise new car dealers. Think about the big independent players that are out there in the marketplace. We haven't even talked about them.
We've got a group down in North Carolina, Matthews Motors. Shout out to my boy Marty Valdegiuli. They are competing with Carvana, CarMax, right in that huge spot. And what is he doing? He's doing digital retail, deliver anywhere. He's got them bought in. I mean, it's a family business. The daughter now runs the company. Dad timely passed away a couple years ago, and she's taken over, and she's just. But they're great on social. Brian's great on social. They're connecting with their communities. It's Sandy, you know this better than most people. It's more than just how you can retail a car. Yep. People want to buy from people they want to do business with. And I use the same example. Before I was a car guy, I was a suit kid. I worked for the Men's Warehouse. The absolute best training I could ever have in my life. Okay, the company gets rid of the CEO. They no longer can guarantee it. They lose their identity, and now they're bankrupt. No one even knows who the hell they are. Right? That's how quickly. Brian, I'm sorry, man. I didn't realize Brian loved George so much. I didn't know you're a big George Zimmer fan, bro. I wasn't trying to get you to leave. I got the guy on my cell phone. I'm sorry.
I'm so happy you brought up George Zimmer, because that has been something I've looked at over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. because I would actually take my son to Men's Warehouse to buy his suits because we weren't spending money on high-end suits for him at the age of 14, 15, 16. But my point is, I watched the actual deterioration of the customer experience as a result of Joseph A. Banks buying them out.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right.
Is that because it was all about experience? He would always say the word guarantee, and every time you talk to him, he'd say, "You better make me look like I'm smart, not a fool. And so you better do what I'm telling you to do." And it was a process across 1,000 stores across the United States. They all ran basically within reason the same. So, guys,
and you can buy a suit anywhere you want, just like you can buy any car anywhere you want. But I can tell you this: having been a few years into this now, I used to always be, oh, what are these guys doing? They're at $299 a month. Let's do $279 a month. We can beat that. We can do this, less money down. Oh, you're going to do $2,000 over KBB. I'm doing $4,000. And then this guy goes, $4,000, $6,000. That's what we're going to do. And I can tell you multiple stories about that now with the Nissan stores doing original MSRP. But you know what they can't do? And I can get into this price battle back and forth with them, but they can't put a commercial about their process on television, because they're not going to be able to deliver on it. They're not going to be able to execute on it. And that's a brand value, or that's a competitive advantage that they can't just decide that they want to advertise that. There's so much more that goes into it. You can't just say, okay, you're going to do that. I guess, do we want to take the financial hit and let's grab market share and let's just, pull our pants down and do that and not fix it from the inside out. We're just going to put some more, Bondo on the outside of it.
Yeah, Best Buy tried it, Brian, when they were like, Apple stores, please. We'll just put a big, huge area in the middle of our store with everything on there. It'll be fine. No, it won't be. Your people aren't trained the same way the Apple store people are trained. You don't have the ability to check me out where we stand. You don't have the ability to do the things I need you to do. So, dude, I completely agree. Gentlemen, I've looked at the clock. I've taken up way too much of your time. This has been cooler than I think I could have even thought it would be. And I want to thank both of you for being on. Sandy, is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with before we sign off here on this beautiful day?
I'm just going to dovetail something Brian just said before, and it might have been glossed over, is that he's looking at the digital retailing impact on the service and parts side of his business. I think it's brilliant. It's one of the reasons why I'm the captain of the Brian Kramer fan club. And Brian, BK, we need to talk offline because
likewise.
No, thank you, buddy. I want to share something with you. I think you should consider it in that end, but that's the next frontier. We got to conquer this one on the front end of the store and then simultaneously start looking at the back end, because I'll tell you right now, guys, if you're not looking at the back end of your dealership right now, you are in for some pain in the next 2 to 3 years. So
I would agree with that. I think, look, I wish these tools were around when I was a GM. I think my owner tallied up the fines OSHA would have sent me from walking customers back into the shop, but I didn't care. Customer said, I don't need brakes. I said, my mechanic says you need brakes. I'm going to walk you back. I'm going to show you your car. And every time my owner just sit there like, Sean, God, if something happens, and it's like, I don't care. I want to make it transparent. So use your video, use your honesty, be open with people about who you are. Brian, leave us with something wonderful, as I know you will.
No, I say just keep it simple. It's very easy to make things complicated. And on a side note, I've enjoyed this conversation because I love, just brainstorm and spitball with like-minded people. But it's so easy to make things complicated. Once you get the process down, I look at it like a big clay sculpture. It's then the leader's job to remove roadblocks for the associates, because if you want to make it good for the customers, you make it good for your associates. And if you want to execute digital retail, make it easier than the way they're currently doing it. Remove friction, remove roadblocks for the way that they do business. And if you don't have everything iframed into one place, so they have to log into this thing and have 25 tabs across their desktop, you gotta make it streamlined. And if you want to execute this, work your ass off to make it easier for your managers and your sales staff and service, like Sandy said, which is a much more giant potential than even the variable side. And that's how you execute digital retail, is you focus on making it easier for your people, and they'll make it easier for your customers.
Wow. See, I knew you'd leave us with the gem I needed you to. Thank you so much, folks. If you haven't been listening, lucky for you, you can find this back anytime you'd like. So go replay it and share it with your friends. Brian and Sandy, thank you so much for joining me. You can find these two all over LinkedIn. I'm sure they're on other social media platforms, but that is where I get to consume these two in all their glory. So that's where I go for it. As always, have yourselves a wonderful week, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks a lot.